The Geithner has a message for Congress when it comes to regulatory reform. Time is the enemy. The Treasury Secretary will be on Capitol Hill today testifying before the House Financial Services Committee. In testimony prepared in advance, he will say an improving economy is not a reason to delay reform. As some normalcy says returns to our financial system and our economy, we cannot let it be cause for complacency, end quote. He'll tell that to lawmakers today. And the White House is pushing for tighter regulations on Wall Street. One key provision is the creation of a financial product safety board aimed at protecting consumers from unfair lending practices. The financial industry strongly opposes that agency. Big question now is how will Congress react? For one view on the future of regulation, let's go to Capitol Hill and Lizzie O'Leary. She's joined by Kevin Hassett, a Bloomberg columnist and director of economic policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute. Lizzie?
Thanks, Monica. Yeah, we are here not far from where the Secretary is going to be testifying. So he's saying in his prepared testimony, time is of the essence. We can't slow down reform. But Congress seems to want to slow this down a little bit or at least make some changes.
Right.
Tell me about that.
This is one case where the administration actually has a plan. They have a proposal, and it's not working. I mean, they're getting pushback from the Senate. They're getting pushback from the House. I think it's interesting that the administration really is to the left of Barney Frank on this. Barney Frank is saying, now, wait a minute, you guys have gone too far. We need to roll that back. In the original administration plan, it looked like they were almost going to regulate your Starbucks card. And now they're putting in exemptions in the House for retailers and so on. So I think that this is going to be a long and dragged-out process.
Well, when you say a dragged-out process, one of the things that's going on here, of course, is that we also have the healthcare debate taking up a lot of legislative oxygen. It's very difficult to move two bills at once. What's the timetable you think we'll see, at least on this side, at least in the House side?
I think a lot of it will depend on whether they're able to reach some kind of agreement on health soon. I think if they're not, if health drags into November, then there's absolutely no chance that they're really going to get a bill through and signed into law this year on financial reform.
Well, one of the things that you watch closely, obviously, you used to be with the Federal Reserve, is the Fed's power here. The administration wanted the Fed to be the systemic risk overarching regulator. That has gotten a lot of congressional pushback, not just from Republicans. Certainly members of the president's own party have had some questions about whether the Fed gets too much power in this plan. Where do you think we end up?
Well, I think that where we're going to end up is that there's going to be a slight modification of the system that we have now, but not a very big one. And I think that we might see some explicit language about what systemic risk is. We're not going to see a list of which firms are so big that we've got to rescue them. We're going to just have a design, really, that we can appeal to when we're trying to think about who they're going to rescue in the next downturn. But I don't actually see big sweeping changes coming. I think in part because of what you mentioned. People are a little anxious about all of the authority that the Fed wielded in this financial crisis. And I think Congress is wary of giving the Fed explicitly that much power.
Well, we see in the draft bill, and both the administration side and the congressional sides, some questions about higher capital requirements, but there's nothing that says these banks actually can't be too big to fail. They need to have a little more money there, but there's nothing that actually limits size or scope.
Right.
Is that a mistake?
Yeah, I think that what we want are lots of little banks. And what they're doing now is they're building up a structure to give us an even worse financial crisis next time. Because what's going to really happen is we're going to decide that there are these too big to fail banks and we're going to give them the government seal of approval. They're going to have lower capital costs than the little guys, and they're going to drive the little guys out of business. We'll have 3 or 4 too big to fail banks, and they're going to fail again because regulators can never stay ahead of the curve on this.
Is that an argument that the administration can make coming into the G20 this week? They are certainly getting pushback from the Europeans on bankers' bonuses, but let's talk about these mega banks. Is that something that will track with the international community?
Yeah, I think the international community wants more banking competition. I think that if you look at the banking in each country, that it tends to be very localized. And there'll be like 1 or 2 super banks, and they talk about like the Olympic champions in Europe and so on. And so I think that definitely we're going to try to increase competition in financial services at the G20 meeting.
All right, well, we're going to hear more about this. You and I are going to keep talking about this, about kind of get into the nitty-gritty of what Secretary Geithner is going to say today, and also particularly the changes that Barney Frank is looking at. So, Monica, we'll come back to you, talk more about that, certainly as we get closer to this hearing starting. I'm going to send it back to you for now.
All right, lots coming up.